You're listening to the JJS Podcast. Up to this point, the most successful companies around the world have had entire departments made up of full-time employees dedicated to providing marketing communication support, leaving every other company without those resources at a distinct disadvantage. Well, the world has changed, and we have to change with it. That's why I'm going to take my 15 years of experience of managing marketing communication strategies for some of the biggest brands in the world and share that knowledge with you so that it can improve your business and your life. So if you're a business professional or an entrepreneur who wants to learn how to deploy the right strategies given your position and the position of the audience you're trying to reach, you're in the right place. Hey guys, welcome to the JJS Podcast. So I've been reluctant to do another episode about Elon Musk and Twitter and that saga. As you know, if you've been following the podcast, I've done a couple episodes on that story, and I didn't want to do another one, even though quite a bit has unfolded in that story since my last episode. Quite a bit has unfolded since then, but I didn't want to comment on any of it because, I felt that I'd already done 2 episodes on it, and I didn't want to be one of these podcasters that's kind of just following around the adventures of Elon Musk or any individual in particular for that matter, and just kind of keep going back to that well, so to speak. So, but the one of the latest developments in that story touches on a subject that we talk about quite a bit on the JJS Podcast, which is this issue of remote work. And this new world of work that we're entering into. So I felt compelled to just to comment on this latest aspect of the story, and it would have been a disservice to the listeners, and it would have been more difficult for me to avoid commenting on it than to. Since it's just doing another episode. So that's what we're doing. So we're going to do this third episode on the Elon Musk and Twitter saga. And, I'm not going to touch on any of the other stuff. I think that has been covered pretty extensively and by folks way more qualified than I to analyze any of it. And so there's really nothing I can contribute more to that conversation regarding, the revelations around the FBI and suppressing certain voices. I've touched on that in the earlier episodes a little bit. That was before all these different revelations were made, and there's just really nothing more I can say regarding any of that stuff. I can't really contribute more to that. It is what it is, right? And it'll be dealt with in some way, and history will make the final judgment on those events. So, but I do want to touch on something that I am a little more qualified to discuss, and that's this issue of remote work. So, as you guys know, when he first took over Twitter, Elon Musk did away with the remote work policy, insisted folks come back and work on site, and that wasn't a surprise because he has not made any mystery of the fact that he is opposed to remote work. He's not a fan of it, and he did also do the same thing at Tesla and SpaceX because he just feels that remote work is, according to him, not productive. People don't actually work, which is stuff that I hate to. I hate it. I don't hate it. Being the "I told you so" guy, but that was something I also discussed in the early days of the pandemic back in 2020. In one of my episodes, I expressed that is basically what most executives believe about remote work, that they don't believe the folks that work for them are actually doing any work when they're working remotely. I said that long before Elon Musk, through his words expressed that exact sentiment. So I am a little bit keyed into what these executive leaders are thinking and how they operate. So, but recently there was an article a friend of mine forwarded to me from the Seattle Times discussing Musk's recent reversal on remote work and how he's kind of done an about-face on this policy. In fact, that he sold they sold off one of the Seattle buildings locations and told the folks who are working there to just work remotely for the duration. So, which I found pretty interesting and got a good chuckle out of, to be honest, because even Elon Musk has now seen that this remote work kind of norm is really undeniable and really cannot be stopped at this point. And in that article, it touches on this issue of productivity. It mentions a study from Stanford that reported remote workers were 5% more productive than in-office workers in the summer of 2020. And there's other studies and data that support that as well. And by the spring of 2022, this productivity gap increased to 9% as companies continue to improve their remote work practices and invest in technology that supported remote work. And, and there's a great article by Tom Medema in Entrepreneur that was published back in December that talks about, how the issue with a lot of these organizations, a lot of these companies, and a lot of these executive types that are opposed to remote work. Again, he talks about something that I mentioned last year in an episode, how the real issue is that these various companies did not create the infrastructure and did not establish the operational models to accommodate remote work. Their operational models, and to no fault of their own, there's no way we could have anticipated what occurred with the pandemic, but they did not design them for a largely, if not fully, remote workforce. And that's really where a lot of this resistance stems from, down to the cultural level, down to the personnel, and their, the basically the audit of who in these organizations has enough technological savvy and know-how to seamlessly navigate in a remote environment, okay, and especially in an asynchronous remote environment. A lot of these folks who've been working in these organizations, a lot of these companies have, they've been products of several decades of corporate norms where, you got up, you drove an hour, you went to work 9 to 5, and you did your work there, and you rubbed shoulders with folks, and you gossiped and whatever, and you were in endless meetings all day, and you went home and you were just completely exhausted and burned out. I mean, they were used to that, and that was what every corporate culture kind of developed around those norms. And so, this article by Tom talks about how, the problem isn't remote work, or that it just doesn't work, and that people don't actually do anything. All the data is counter to that notion or that assertion. I mean, there's multiple studies here that we can cite all day that demonstrate that is just not true. The productivity goes up, and just common sense. If you use your just think logically for a second. If you're not bounding yourself to geography, and you're not bounding yourself to a specific area, and you can hire anyone from anywhere, obviously, you have more of an opportunity to, stack your bench with better and better talent, because now you don't have this limitation anymore around either folks who live around you or folks who are willing to live around you. And so, obviously the output is going to be greater. But again, the issue is, when they signed their commercial leases, they didn't think about that. When they when they invested in certain tools, or didn't invest in certain tools, they weren't thinking about everyone working remotely and all these other things. So, and folks who were hired because they're really good at selling to people in person, at trade shows or whatnot, all of those things were decisions that were made under the presumption that this in-person kind of working model would always exist for the foreseeable future. And so, a lot of them are resisting, but the issue is, okay, and I've talked about it extensively on this show. I won't, go back into it, but when everyone went remote and the pandemic happened, a lot of things changed for folks, and a lot of the factors changed, and a lot of the scenarios changed for folks. And that does impact what you can feasibly do as an executive now, or as a management team for a company. It doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter how established you are. It doesn't matter how many years you've been doing this, or that you have access to the media and you have plenty of airtime. None of that matters. You can't change these things. The fact that it just makes more financial sense, and not necessarily, if you want to make the argument that, I'll play devil's advocate. If you want to make the argument that maybe it's not the best idea for people to work at their home where there's a whole bunch of distractions, and they still got to take care of the kids and work, and the dog is barking and all these things. That's one thing, but in a remote first kind of work model, people don't necessarily have to be working from home. They could be working from any location they want to, a WeWork or something. So, but that, that model of folks not necessarily having to physically go into an on-site office, that is not going away. It's just not. Even if you have this situation now where employers are making everyone come back to the office, and even if it happens momentarily for a year or so, when things flip again and they no longer have the leverage as they did just a few short years ago, they're then going to have to fight this insistence by the workers to have the option to work remotely again, and then they're going to go through the whole same rigmarole of not being able to deal with it because they don't have the right tools in place and they don't have the right infrastructure and so on and so forth. So, and again, another thing that needs to be understood, AI and robotic technology is only improving. It's getting more and more sophisticated at a rapid pace, and so more and more jobs, even some that will surprise us, are going to be automated. Okay, they're just going to be. It's going to make, talk about financial, what makes financial sense. It's going to make more financial sense for a lot of employers and a lot of organizations to simply automate a lot of functions, and not just necessarily manual labor functions, but a lot of the functions that are being performed right now by people who make a lot of money and feel like they've got a very high market value. People in finance and people in ops and those kind of things. Those jobs will be automated. Rest assured. You may not think they're going to be automated soon. You may be thinking, well, yeah, James, if that's years down the road. I don't know, man. I mean, do you see what's going on with the Chat GPT and all these things? I mean, the AI is getting atomically smarter, just by the second. So things that are just mainly calculation, when you boil it down, I mean, certain jobs or functions that really, if you just boil it down, aside from, it's like that guy in Office Space is like, well, I'm a people person, I have relationships. If you put all that aside, if your job basically is just calculation or operational improvement, or improving efficiencies and things like that, it's not something that requires any true creativity or originality. I don't know. I'm pretty certain those things are going to be automated. So when you put all that together, and you have just growing automation of different functions and different skills, and you have this this normalization we've experienced, this mass normalization of remote work, and the ubiquity of opportunities to generate income in other ways that have nothing to do with employment. I mean, if you put all that together, fighting this remote work thing is futile, and it's foolish, in my opinion. You should be, instead of wasting your time trying to figure out how to defeat it and how to like just get everybody back to the office and get everybody back on site and demand they come back on site and, you know, give the all clear. And by the way, okay, cases are rising again, you know, like, and I've said that numerous times on this show. It's getting redundant. I mean, if you've been following the show, if someone were to go through my episodes, if you were to go through all my episodes from episode 1 till now, you would be nauseated at how many times I'm repeating myself here at different points in history. Okay, it's. And I'm not saying I'm a you know, a prophet or anything. I'm just saying this is logic. I mean, look at what's happening. You just do the math, you know. And so instead of wasting everyone's time and your time in just trying to fight it, get used to it. Start adapting your models to it. I mean, Elon Musk is doing it. He's even said, and he's somebody who hates remote work, absolutely hates it, and is one of the wealthiest people in the world and one of the most powerful people in the world. And even he is to the point where it's like, just let them work remote. It's just not working. Trying to make them all come back. And it's too expensive to have, you know, the cleaning and the security for these buildings when folks are barely using them. I mean, if you do have a hybrid schedule or a hybrid work model, think about how much money you're wasting in the AC or any of that stuff. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And all because folks just, you know, I just want to go back to the way it was, where people were working on site and working here, and that's it. And not working, not having a side hustle or moonlighting somewhere else and doing all these things. I want them to, you know, be back to being dependent on the income they get from their job, so I have more control over them and management over them and all these things. Look, I get all that, but it's not working. It doesn't work. Things have changed, and things have changed before. I mean, how do you think folks felt during the Industrial Revolution? Right? How do you think folks felt when the Model T was invented? People who made their living off of horse and buggies, right? You know, you either fight it and desperately combat it and just eventually die off anyway, or you adapt and you survive and you thrive. And the faster you can do that, the better it is. But it's to the point now where it's, you know, I mean, I sit here and I see back, look, you know, everyone calling back their employees and whatnot. And then I see, you know, cases rising again, and same pattern. The cases were rising overseas. Now they're rising in the U.S. And I'm not necessarily saying it'll get as bad as it was before, but this is the norm now. Even if it isn't COVID, in a globalized world, there's going to be things that spread. So I'm getting to the point where I'm like at my wit's end here talking about this. Is like, we can keep fighting this and we can keep trying to get everyone to come back and work on the office and do this again and do away with remote work. But you're going to fail eventually. This approach of fighting it and resisting it is not going to work ultimately. And if you're just trying to fight it until you're retired or something like that, you know, I guess that makes sense. But it doesn't make sense if you're, you know, a young professional or someone who's trying to really turn things around at an organization or at a company from a leadership position. If you're one of those folks, you know, it's time to get with it and time to understand that even the hybrid thing is in my view myopic because you're still limiting to folks who have to live around you, have to live around the building. You know, no one can be from another state and come in 3 days a week into your office or into your you know, place of work. So you're still limiting yourself, and then your competitors aren't doing that. They're getting the best people they can find from anywhere in the world. So, you know, it's just kind of it's just getting to and another some of the other stuff that was quoted in that story. You know, an NBER study illustrated that remote work lowered wage growth by 2% over the first 2 years of the pandemic. So people were taking less money being able to work remotely, probably because the cost of living is different for them where they are as compared to what they need to get compensated for the job they're doing. And probably additionally because the remote work allows them to generate income in other ways. It says a survey of 3,000 workers at top companies such as Google, Amazon, or Microsoft found that 64% would prefer to work from home permanently rather than receive a $30,000 pay raise. So think about that. Folks at some of these big companies would rather, they would have rather work remotely than make $30,000. I mean, just extrapolate that across the economy, across the labor force. So even there's even economic argument to be made here. I mean, it's just, I feel, it's, if you follow the show, you're well aware at this point. I just feel that we are entering into a remote first work world going forward, similar to major changes that happened in the Industrial Revolution, similar to the changes that happened when folks, most folks weren't working in factories anymore, but were instead working in office buildings. We're now entering a phase where more and more people, and larger share of the workforce, is just going to work remotely online from the offices. And this is consistent with the arc of history. This is been the trend. And so I strongly implore those in the professional world to really think about just kind of accepting that this is the future and accepting this is the way it's going to be and adapting to it instead of railing against it or resisting it or fighting it and then eventually having to relent anyway, like Elon Musk. So let me know your thoughts. Be sure to comment and subscribe and like the show and all that good stuff. And I'm happy to hear your thoughts and happy to get your feedback. And as always, good luck out there. Thank you for checking out this episode of the JJS Podcast. If you're watching us via YouTube, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the show. And if you're listening in through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or something like that, be sure to rate us there as well. Hope you enjoyed listening. And remember, communication without strategy is just noise. Till next time.